No, you come on with this paper. Sure.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming this beautiful evening. It's great to see such a turnout to honour James Madden. It's great to see all the locals. And I'd like to welcome the family who travelled far and wide to be here tonight to honour the anniversary of Tom's death. It's a fairly short programme with just a few speakers. I just go through my notes, what I have to go through. And we're gathered here to honour fallen comrade, Commandant James Madden, who was murdered by the Free State Forces in 1926. Now, first of all, I'll call on Tom Madden to lay a wreath on behalf of the Madden family and the Republican Monument Committee. And thank you, Tom. Now call on Tom Hennessy to lay a wreath on behalf of the Tipperary Independent Republican. Thank you, Tom. And finally, I'd like to call on Lorraine Hickey, who wants to lay a wreath on behalf of the family. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, Lorraine. Now, as we're gathered here especially to remember James Madden, we should also remember other Republicans from this area who gave their life for the cause of Irish freedom and who were, some were killed, some deceased. But we'd like to remember Commandant Matterine Lacken, Commandant Johnny Sheehy, Micheál Hughes, Jack Hickey and his wife Ann Boyle, Dennis Carey, Templederry, Michael Maher Garnmore, Joe Mangan over Tullamoyle, and recently deceased Noel Harrington, who was just buried out here, all great Republicans. So we can acknowledge them while we're here too. So I now call on Tom, who will say a few words. Thanks.
Well, Diaz Merrigan, the Gochdana, Alshna Shleta. And what I would like to do is to, I suppose, honour all of the people from this district, because out of the district came a lot of things, including the Republican movement here. We won't mention good hurlers because they're on either side of us. But maybe one of the best ways to do it is to go back and let Father Nicholas speak. He can't be here this evening, obviously. And I'd love to read a poem that he wrote. He wrote it in 1983. And I remember coming down with him. I think he knew the days were getting shorter. And we used to come down on trips to Tip and trips to Cork as well, where his dad had been. And God knows his dad had been all over Cork and Kerry, because I think he was the organiser for both of them. But Nicholas wrote this poem, and he called it On Shliuv Kamalcha. There in a ring of hills it lay, the tiny mountain farm where they took refuge so long ago from rapacious roundheads, where desperation drove them to claim moorland, reclaim moorland, manure, bit dung and human perspiration, until a rough skin of grass ensured pasture for scrawny cattle and food to rear the children who survived the nightmare battle. 5 frugal acres set down neatly between Steeple and Barnahown are monumental to their tenacious hope, courage and incessant toil. The will to cope defiantly with enigmatic fate and Warty crumbles Christian hate. Potato blight and famine drained the upland farmsteads. Young women aged with care and hardy men strained beyond endurance wept and trudged the weary road to diaspora and new worlds. Those who hung on to draw water and desperately hew existence from reluctant stone begot heroes who fought for freedom until justice was seen to be done, and mountainy men walked upright on a level ground under an honest sun. Even the remnant is now gone, the childless men and women who dared to laugh in the face of extinction. They too have not been spared. Behind a gloomy clump of trees, their modest ancestral home moulders away relentlessly, gnawed by time and negligence, and one looks towards Glown, Foildove and Mahershley to scan the Delphic heavens and make hard decisions for another weary day. Yes, they too heard the shrill call of the cycling curlew, now the forlorn echo of the thrill of polyphony that once flew up from Binisgach, and murmur told of round after prayerful round on worn beads by the old, huddled by the hob on gnarled knees. While the wondrous sound of bees plundering heather and foxglove for nectar drowns the whispering trot of flighted lovers lost in the blushing whortleberries. The excited cries of children at play, the men shouting their stock to haul, knocking Kjol out of the side with the swish of the clarion of yesterday, urging at dawn their waking team to the metallic rhythm of the mowing machine. Not for years has the lurching common cart rattled up from Antainach to the chain reaction of 100 dogs barking off their frantic heads, much less the high-pitched flute and boweron, concertina, fiddle and melodeon, beat out a static time for swirling petticoats and hobnailed didoram. In the hushed emptiness, my veins drum the beat of dead generations, a codetta to their unfinished symphony, while the in history's void, clashing atoms, shuttle, convoluted, Ballycommons. Nicholas O'Majane. And like every poet, he leaves a footprint somewhere. And he uses the word didoram. A didoram is in Greek verse. It's a line of poetry with 10 feet in it. Yeah. So he wanted you to know he was that way inclined. I suppose the next thing we should do, or that I want to do, is just to talk about some of the Maddens that were around the place at the time. You had two families of Maddens, as we know. We had Professor Jim, Father Nicholas's father, and then you had Tom and Bridget, and they eventually would be down in Dromard. So his brothers were John Madden, and John is in Dromard, and I think the young John, who's now a barrister, is here. I won't ask him to put up his hand, but he's here anyway. And this kind of, I suppose, points up the love of education that the Maddens always had. You know, they had education, they loved education, good garden, tip-winning hurling matches every week, which is more than important. And then you had another Tom Madden, brother to James, and he ended up in Donaghadee, County Kildare. He went off and studied forestry up there, and now it's become a beautiful garden. He did forestry and was sent out there, and it was just holes and streams, and he brought it into a lovely garden. And then my father Edward, who later lived in Kildare with his wife Maureen family, and it was a sad thing of history that my father left here. Uncle James died. Before he died though, he was in Nina. He was arrested, brought to Nina. Then he was brought to Limerick. And while in Limerick, he was brought up to the Rat camp on the Curragh. And I grew up in a house, I suppose, 1.5 miles away from where the Rat camp would have been. And I was always confused in the family, because when it came to the rosary, my father would be praying for 2 James Maddens. And you said, you did that James before. No, there were 2 James Maddens. But every week we would walk up to where the camp had been and say prayers. Like every November we would come down here, and with the month of the Holy Souls, we came down here and we prayed for everyone in the family and the families that they knew, all the Ryans and you name it, they were all there. What I didn't know at that time is that my mother's uncle had also been involved up in Kildare, and he got away with a lot because his surname was Cardiff. And they were a long time walking past him saying, that couldn't be him, couldn't be him. And he kept sheep on the Curragh. He knew every blade of grass in it. So Matt Cardiff was his name. And I think Cardiff came down to work in the railway in Nina. But it just shows you how two families, and we didn't know this for a long time, that their offspring actually met in the rat camp. And it wasn't a nice place. I often visit, there's nothing left, only walls on the ground and the old part of the sewage thing, but it was cruel. And then on the sisters we had Margaret Boyle, and it's wonderful that Margaret's descendant is here, Kathleen Nichols. And Kathleen has returned and she's now living in Templemore. So she's a proud lady. Granddaughter of Margaret Madden. The other Madden that would have been here, and she's represented this evening as well, was Delia, who became Delia Condon and lived in Thurles. Now the use of the name Delia was usually if there was a mother called Bridget, and then a baby was born and wanted to be named Bridget. They wouldn't baptise her as Bridget, but she'd always be called Delia, which is the short for Dealish in Irish, sweetheart. So you'll get that. You go looking for Delias, but you go back to a Bridget. And she reared a great family. We have Cork representatives here, and then I'm sure we have a few from Dublin as well. And then, of course, you had Aunt Eileen Murphy, and Eileen's son, Tom, Lord of Mercy, and Francis is here. Actually, himself and my dad put up the first plaque there years ago. They came out from it. That time you had to walk across stepping stones to get here, if you might remember. But it just shows you how families, the story of the time was kept quiet in the families. And it's only now that it's starting to leak out. It wasn't that there wasn't pride in them, but they didn't want anyone else to get into trouble. And God knows there was enough trouble around living in Kildare. There was an awful lot that was passing by every day. But it was a way of, I suppose, keeping us safe. But he always kept us proud. Like if the tipstar didn't come into our house every week, yet he sent up to the town about 4 times until the van arrived, and your man would have to tell you he had a puncture or something to get himself into heaven. But the military barracks still remains. What's left of standing is very, very small. The old sewage works is there, as I say, and so on. But just a small little piece about my mother's uncle, Matt Cardiff. On the 28th of May, a report in the Leinster Leader that as a result of police and military raids in that Garvan area, Matt Cardiff, insurance agent, Blackroth, Curragh, was arrested and taken to the Curragh camp. Later sentenced to 2 years. Thomas Wilmot was arrested at 3 o'clock on a Friday morning at his residence, and both were prominent members of the GAA and the Gaelic League. The Gaelic League was a huge connecting point. And the GAA, of course, Matt Cardiff, my mother's another uncle, he was called Tom Goulden, won an All-Ireland medal in 1919 playing football for Kildare. So that just gives you some idea of the way families are in the story. And it all started here. And my God, every time I drive through here, I look across to the other side of the road as well, to where Mary Teresa is buried, up in Burgess, And with Nicholas, he'd love to be here now, because, as I say, when he was really retired, we travelled all, we didn't go into Kerry, we should have, but we did all of North Cork, parts of Waterford and so on, but I think we're going to hear more about that anyway. But it's an honour for me to be here, and it's great to see so many people, and God bless every single one of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Tom. That was lovely. Before we proceed, I'd like to thank some people who travelled. Tom has mentioned some, but there's currently a Kennedy gathering going on in this area at the moment from all over the world, and we have some members of the Kennedy family here. Maureen Kennedy is here to represent the Kennedys. And there's a lady with her, Anwyn Lewis from Wales, who's a member of Plaid Cymru, and she came along this evening to express her solidarity with the Republican movement. And she asked me to express the hope that one day to see Wales, Scotland and Ireland free nations. So thank you, Anwyn. Just there. Tom mentioned passing this and the memorial here, and I'd especially like to thank the three lads who put in the effort to have it looking so well today. That's Tom Stapleton, Sean Madden and Cathal Ryan. So thanks lads for all your work on that. So now I'd like to call on our main speaker to give the main oration for James Madden, and he has researched him and he's mentioned in the book that he wrote and all. So I'd like to call on Paddy Hackett to say a few words. Yeah.
You have to excuse me for sitting down. I'm not getting any younger, you know what I'm saying? So I'm sorry about that. Right, can I have my glasses there, please? We're gathered here today to commemorate and honour the memory of IRA Commandant James Madden of Bolingbroke, Dolla. To begin, I will give a bit of family background. James's father was Tom and his mother was Ryan Leam from Common in the parish of Templederry. There were 4 boys in the family: James, John, Tom and Ned, and 6 girls: Kathleen, Noreen, Margaret, Delia, Eileen and Mary. Tom Sr. and Matt the Barracks were the founding members of Sinn Féin in the locality. They became chairman and secretary, respectively, of the Common, and Tom was afterwards became known as Sinn Féin Madden. After the 1916 Easter Rising, the 2 men, as representatives for North Tipperary, attended a conference in the Mansion House, Dublin, which had been called to examine the rebellion, to determine what went wrong and discuss future strategy. Tom's brother, Professor Madden, was also busy organising the volunteers in Cork and Kerry during that period. So politically, it was obvious where the family's sympathies lay, and it was a foregone conclusion that James, his son, would follow in his footsteps. Commandant Madden was involved with the volunteers from the age of 18 and played a very active part in the Black and Tan War and Civil War. He was considered to be a very able soldier. He was very close to Paddy Ryan Lacken, understood to be his right-hand man. Another trusted friend was volunteer Sonny O'Neill from County Cork. James thought, as did the majority of the IRA volunteers, that a ceasefire was a temporary process, a breathing space if you like, and were busy preparing for the next stage of the conflict. So they were horrified at the settlement of 1922, which they considered a sellout and betrayal of the Easter 1916 proclamation and all this they believed in. This, as we all know, led to great upset within the island of Ireland, within Republican forces. It caused a split within the volunteers, pro and anti-treaty IRA, and tragically was to ignite a bitter civil war. Commandant Madden's record in the Tan War and Civil War unfortunately was unavailable to me, as all of his contemporaries of those days were long dead. We know he fought in the last major engagement of the Civil War in these hills and ridges he knew so well, afterwards known as the fight for Clay. In this operation, huge numbers of Free State soldiers carrying out sweeping operations arrived in the hills. One section coming in from Tour became lost in a fog. Another section out from Nina were repulsed and forced to retreat under Republican fire. The battle lasted all day. The Free State soldiers, armed with all sorts of armaments, including heavy machine guns, whereas Republicans were only lightly armed. The staters, they say locally, were saved by the dark, as they were able to pull back under cover of darkness. According to local tradition, the Free Staters were beaten that day by Sean Carroll's men. They were and Lackett's Thompson gun. The following account of Commandant Madden's capture and detention was given to me by his brother. When I was doing my original research on James Madden, must be 30 years ago now, I was very fortunate to meet his brother, Tom, who was then living in Kildare. This is Tom's account. James' reputation as an effective commander with the Republican forces made him a marked man during the Civil War. It was early in the year. Free State troops came in from Clown, crossed the butt of Keeper and onto Binnisjock. As they came, they shot a hare on the mountainside along the way, so if James had been home, I would have had him gone. But he wasn't. He was in Burks of Curryquin. The soldiers continued until they met the Nina to Kilcommon Road. They were split up. One going down what was little more than a pathway, a track, if you like. And the other section followed the road down towards Dolla, through Curryquin, Mount Island and that area. It was then they came upon Burks, where James was captured. Also taken at the house was volunteer Jim Burke, a relation of the owner, known locally as Gunner Burke. The two Republicans were later transferred to Nina military barracks. There they were joined by other prisoners picked up in similar sweeps of the area. While in detention, the prisoners were badly beaten there. Later the soldiers went to the pub, went drinking, and when they returned, they took the prisoners out one by one for execution, but they just fired above their heads. Each unfortunate prisoner was then taken to a building within the barracks, which was being used as a makeshift mortuary and kept there. From Nina Barracks, they were transferred to Limerick Jail, where James became ill, and then onto Hare Park internment camp at the Curragh. Despite his illness, he participated in the mass protest there. James was never the same man again after his release. A neighbour stated that even when he sat next to the fire, he complained of the cold. When he died, which was sudden in the finish-up, they said it was the flu that took him. Afterwards, the family were informed tubercle meningitis was the cause of death. Before I continue now, I want to read a few lines of a poem he wrote while in Hare Park. God made the bees, they made the honey. The Republicans done the work, but the staters took the money. My hands are cold, my feet are damp, as I write this verse in Hare Park camp. But come what may, I will still be true to God, to Ireland, and to you. And it's signed James Madden, Tip North Battalion. To conclude this oration, I will say this. I wonder if James Madden was standing here amongst us this evening, what would he think? I know he would be pleased and honoured that 100 years after his death, so many of his neighbours, the noble people of the hills who always stood by the Republic, came out to remember and honour his legacy. I would say to him, what you and your comrades fought and died for was never so close as it is today. Other people like you over the years since picked up the baton also, after that terrible sellout in 1922. The men of the 50s border campaign and the heroic people of our 6 counties, after decades of sectarian brutality, rose up and fought the Brits to a standstill. I would say to him, even the people who hounded you, murdered you and executed you in your day, Fine Gael, seeing the writing on the wall, are now also calling for a united Ireland. Although you died during a very dark period of our national historical events, no doubt a disappointed man, I know that, like us, future generations of Irish people living in a free Ireland will bless you and your comrades for the sacrifices you made. You will be remembered in our songs and poems, our culture, which makes us different from other peoples. In the joy, happiness and laughter of future generations living in a free and peaceful Ireland, you will be remembered. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go on, this is important. Before we depart, ladies and gentlemen, and this is important as I said, I would like to mention another Madden, an Eamon Madden from Glantan, Tipperary. Eamon is one of the great unsung heroes of the most recent campaign in the North. He was of enormous help to us from the 70s right up to the 90s and achieved more than most volunteers. So those of us still living, he holds a special place in our thoughts and in our hearts. May he rest in peace. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Paddy. It's a lovely oration. Thanks very much. Gerald Bryant is going to sing us a song now, and I'm sure it's very in keeping with the mood. Thanks, Gerald.
When doing the commemorations during for the Republicans of the Civil War, I came on one of the modern historians, a fabulous lady, many of you may be familiar with her, Liz Gillis. And this song I wrote is called Brothers at War, and it's based on Liz Gillis's book called The Hales Brothers. Tom Hales was the last man to speak to Collins, leaving Bandon, and when Collins's men turned the bend for Bail-the-Blaw, that was Sean Hales, in Bandon, Tom Hales was just about removing the bomb. They didn't think there's anyone would come on. So there's 2 brothers at both sides of our horrendous 11-month civil war. The book tells the horrors of the British. Tom got beaten so badly that the man beaten with him never came out of a mental institution. During negotiations and the debate, Tom Hales advised the people of Ireland to take the treaty, but renege on everything the British had promised. And maybe there was a thought in it. So Sean Hales was very, very unnerved by Emmett Dalton's part in Bail-the-Blaw, and couldn't understand how, as Collins lay on the ground, how he could be at the wrong side of the bullet. And there was no post-mortem. So when he was going back to Dublin with more particulars in his pocket to push the authorities to have another look into how Collins actually was shot, he was shot dead by 2 young Republicans. In mistake, they meant to shoot Padraig O'Malley. And as we know, after the death of Sean Hales, the 4 Republicans were pulled out of jail on the 8th of December 22. Rory O'Connor, Lee Mellows, Rory Gelvin and Barrett, 1 from each province. So here is Brothers at War. It's written in the context of being from Tom's mouth. In 1916, a great wave came o'er our land, once more to fight the despot, once more to make a stand. We watched that Easter Irish people show the world, as David faced Goliath, our freedom's flame unfurled. My sister Madge, you hero, braver than any heart, with Robert Leeman O'Donnell, all play the rebel's part. British tortured me, they jailed me, they left my body broken, but for Ireland and their comrades, one word was never spoken. I love you, Sean, my brother, like I loved no other. I thought like you, I fought like you, for freedom's dream. But now we must part, our parents' tears will start. I'll die for my republic, you can have your free state. You say we got our freedom, though loyal to a foreign king. The crown that stole our land and blood, you swear to its ring. Must we sacrifice our children where the foil and lagan flow? When will we have our freedom? When will the whole world know? I love you, Sean, my brother, like I loved no other. I thought like you, I fought like you, for freedom's dream. But now we must part, and our parents' tears will start. I'll die for my republic, you can have your free state. For centuries we died by hand of Saxon gun. Will we now die by hand of a neighbour's son? Your treaty with an empire whose word is not a seal, a wound across our heartland, a wound that will not heal. So I love you, Sean, my brother, like I loved no other. I thought like you, I fought like you, for freedom's dream. But now we must part, and our parents' tears will start. I'll die for my republic, you can have your free state. Yes, I'll die for my republic, you can have your free state.
Thanks, sir. That was absolutely beautiful ballad. Very well sang. Thanks. I remember the committee. It's called the Commemoration Committee that formed in 2019 to remember the 100th anniversary of all the people. 27 of these we've held for the men who gave their lives for the country, and we've one left It's on the 24th of July. It's a Friday, and it's for Patrick Whelan, coming into Patrick Whelan, and that'll be held in Kilboy Cemetery in Puckane. So you put that in your diary, and that's the completion then of our task to commemorate and remember. It's important that we remember those brave men who gave their lives in this area. So I now call, just before I finish, thanks everyone for coming. A lovely evening, and I think James was well honoured here tonight from the speakers and from the people who travelled and from the locals. It's great to see you all. So I'll now call on the Piper to place the lamentation. Thank you.
Just one Liam Lynch commemoration is on next Sunday, and the Piper and all those that came to see him to support us with their flags and that, so they'll be all in Liam Lynch's. So our own one is this night fortnight in Kildirna to remember Patrick Whelan, as Kevin said. So we'd like to see as many as possible would turn up for that.